Hello, welcome to my political news opinion review of major news from June of 2020. This series is where I provide my opinion on major news and perhaps personal political/business news from the previous month. I do this as I am a politician, and so it is essential that the people constantly know my opinion on topics so they understand how I would react to situations in a position of power in order to assist them or do the right thing. I will cover June 2020 in relation to Black Lives Matter post George Floyd, both domestic and international responses to that, COVID-19's second surge, West Virginia's primary election results, how businesses should look at office work going forward, landmark Supreme Court cases, and reports of Russia paying bounties to Afghani militants for American soldiers. Following the murder of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement has grown considerably. Additionally, the movement to defund or abolish the police has gained attention as the officers involved in Floyd's death worked for a department that had already attempted the reformist, quote, solutions, end quote. The defunding movement may sound counterproductive until you truly look into it. Funds given to the police departments would be diverted to rehabilitation centers, social workers, mental health professionals, and other community resources more likely to handle certain situations better. This would be accomplished by either police reforms or, for those proposing police abolition, a community-led team. The result is less police confrontations, a healthier community, and a community with the needed resources being funded properly. Almost as a parody to this, the Moundsville, West Virginia Police Department unveiled a, quote, free, end quote, except for insurance, gas, maintenance, etc., military vehicle. The vehicle is worth approximately $1 million, can easily destroy roads it drives on, and is now patrolling a town of less than 10,000 people. Defunding the police will make us more safe, not less safe. As peaceful protests occurred in Washington, D.C., they were tear-gassed and removed from the area surrounding the White House, as they remained peaceful, and it being half an hour or more until the D.C. curfew went into effect. This removal was ordered by the Trump administration to allow the president to travel along with dozens of others to a church in the area for what amounted to a photo op, a clear insult to the Constitution of the United States of America through the denial of a peaceful protest with no justifiable reason. The bishop of the church condemned the president's actions. The world is down a handsome 18-year-old Hispanic man after Andres Guardando, don't know if I pronounced that correctly, was shot in the back while in a clearly non-threatening position. Andreas was working as a security guard, one of two jobs he was using to pay for school. While talking with individuals around his workplace's location, police arrived and pulled their guns on Andreas for no reason. Andreas was scared and so briefly ran a short distance, likely out of the fight or flight instinct that all people have, before surrendering. As he kneeled, hands in the air, he was shot repeatedly in the back despite posing no threat to the police. Following this, the police destroyed the cameras at Andreas's workplace and took the recording device. The police later returned with a warrant for the footage that they had destroyed. This is unfucking acceptable. Out of fear of the current events, the chapter of the Ku Klux Klan, who are active in the Beckley, West Virginia area, began to distribute papers that had many racist and bigoted messages alongside websites and contact information for the local chapter. Claims on the paper include, quote, not quote, they claim that non-white immigrants and liberal government policies are responsible for COVID-19 and called COVID-19, quote, white genocide, end quote. There were threats such as, quote, white men can't jump but they can shoot, exclamation point, end quote, and beware of the, and quote, beware of the majority, end quote. They advocate praying for white Americans in 2020, claiming the start of a race war, and many more disturbing messages and ideas were included on these papers. There are claims that the police refused to respond to the area, which makes an unacceptable situation far worse if true. We need the city, WVU Tech, and every influential entity in the area to denounce this and put every effort they have into shutting down the Beckley area's Ku Klux Klan. Various governments and politicians around the world have condemned the president's response, showed support to Black Lives Matter, or otherwise showed support to the movement through analogies within their own countries. Many parliaments and congresses have either declared their support or such motions have been introduced. I encourage you to look into the international responses. As one of these motions moved its way through the Canadian Parliament with little opposition, the leader of the New Democratic Party, a Democratic Socialist and Social Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, pointed out the racism of a member of Parliament. When asked what he had said by the speaker, he repeated his correct claim that the individual was racist. For this statement, Singh was removed from the floor of the House of Commons. Singh has refused to apologize and has stood by the correct reality that that member of Parliament was racist. As COVID-19 cases flattened, many people called for the reopening of states. The move would obviously cause a spike in cases, especially as people protested against quarantine, and others were forced by the government's lack of action against police brutality into the streets. So unsurprisingly, following that, in all 50 states, there were reopenings, even if only partial, causing the United States to experience a large and quick increase in the number of cases of COVID-19. Please understand we are still dealing with a pandemic. In June, the West Virginia primary elections occurred following their postponement due to the COVID-19 pandemic back in May. The movement that I support, West Virginia Can't Wait, won the primary election in all 3 U.S. representative races, as well as the primary election race for U.S. Senate. The main organizer candidate of WV Can't Wait, Stephen Smith, did not win the primary for the governor's election, however. I look forward to voting in the general election for people who aren't going to be complacent, which led to the switch from strong Democratic to strong Republican in West Virginia, nor will they favor big money interests instead of the people. On election night, the winner of the WV U.S. Senate Democratic primary, Paula Jean Swearengin, experienced discrimination based on her progressive policy positions. One news outlet didn't have a portrait of her, though had one for both the other major candidates. Another didn't report any of the votes she received for a long period of time, showing her at 0 votes despite actually being in the lead, and many other practices that were ridiculous and insulting. The news outlets implicated include both left-wing and right-wing media, showing how, despite what many believe, progressives are still shunned by both. In the 3rd Congressional District Democratic primary election, the results were too close to call for over a week. Despite that, Lacey Watson, who had a small lead, claimed victory. This would have made Watson the first black congressional candidate from the state of West Virginia, and as part of the WV Can't Wait movement, would have made for a great congressman. This victory claim was, however, premature, not to mention insulting, simply because there was a distinct possibility that he would not be the nominee. Sure enough, another WV Can't Wait candidate won the nomination, Hillary Turner. It was ridiculous of Watson to have claimed victory, though he would have instantly had my vote in the general, as he was an amazing candidate. I hope that Mr. Watson decides to run for political office once again, though if Hillary wins the congressional seat, hopefully a different position. Due to COVID-19, many employers who traditionally have employees working in an office environment have had to transition to a remote working setup. The response to this new setup has been greatly varied from employee and employer alike. Many are deciding to allow employees to work from home for however long they wish. Others hope to transition to a plan where working from home is an option for part, but not all, of the work week. As a future business owner and a student who has experienced COVID-19 related remote classes, I will commit now to having employees only required to work in an office setting when working with a project manager who prefers or is better at in-person meetings. The Supreme Court has ruled in favor of common sense and human rights, as they have recognized that it is unconstitutional to fire someone due to their sexuality or gender identity. This is wonderful, as the only legitimate reason to fire an employee is because they have hurt/harmed the business or a coworker in a tangible, provable way. Before this ruling, it was possible for a person to get married on Saturday, then fired on Monday for getting married. It should not matter to a business what a person does in their own home. In another case, the Supreme Court ruled that attempts to dismantle the DACA program by the Trump administration were illegal. This means that rightly so, children with no memory of their country of origin will be allowed to stay in their home country of the United States of America. This ruling is wonderful as it means that dreamers will be able to stay here at home. In a case related to abortion restrictions in Louisiana, the Supreme Court ruled that the restriction was unconstitutional. The law would have unnecessarily restricted which doctors would be allowed to perform an abortion in a clear attempt to make it impossible in the state. Since a fetus does not become a living being, aka a baby, until early in the second trimester, any restriction on abortion during the first trimester is idiotic, anti-life, and as ruled by the Supreme Court, unconstitutional. Unfortunately, swing vote Chief Justice Roberts has said that certain other abortion restrictions are still potentially legal. Finally, there was a news story noting that Russia hired Afghani bounty hunters. I will read my social media post on the story, then provide some additional commentary. Assuming the reports to be true, this would be my response. Quote, following the delivery of this information to the executive branch, the Russian president and Russian diplomats should have immediately been contacted to schedule meetings. Upper-level Department of Defense management, not already aware, should have been briefed along with the cabinet and congressional leadership. American troops in Afghanistan should have received appropriate warnings and potentially, quote, valuable targets, end quote, being withdrawn from the most dangerous areas, eventually being removing them from the country. Negotiate and discuss the situation with Russian officials, working toward the cancellation of the bounties. And since the information would almost certainly have been made available to the public at this point, reassure the American people that you are doing everything in your power to ensure the safety of our soldiers in Afghanistan, with this being a nationally televised presidential address if the situation appears that serious, end quote. With that in mind, we must also consider the convenient timing in the military-industrial complex, which includes the U.S. intelligence agencies, who led us into a war against Saddam Hussein under false pretenses. Afghani militants would have killed American soldiers regardless of whether these bounties existed or not, because we are still at war with them. Some American soldiers were meant to withdraw from Afghanistan shortly before this story. While the story is potentially true, it must not be used to justify war, as my response to this situation shows: diplomacy first, second, third, and fourth. Please like this video, share it with family and friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, making sure to hit the bell icon. Please also check out my Instagram, @Lopez4OKill, Twitter, @Lopez4OKill, Snapchat, @Lopez4OKillWV, and Facebook, facebook.com/Colby.Lopez.12, which all should be linked in the description. Please stay safe, wash your hands, understand that we must still social distance, and de-stress. I'm Colby Lopez, and I approve this message.